The question hangs in the cold mountain air of Keddie, California, even after all these years. It's a simple question, but the answer is anything but. Did a messy, bitter love triangle lead to one of the most brutal and baffling unsolved murders in American history? To understand that, you have to go back to a small, isolated cabin and a night of unimaginable violence. The place was Keddie, a former resort town tucked away in the Sierra Nevada mountains. By 1981, it was a shadow of its former self. The lodge was closed, the cabins were run down. It was a place people went when they didn't have many other options. And that's where Glenna Sue Sharp and her 5 children landed. She was 36, recently separated from her husband and trying to make a new life for her family. They moved into cabin 28. Sue had 5 kids. The oldest, John, known as Johnny, was 15. Sheila was 14. Tina was 12. And the 2 youngest boys, Rick and Greg, were 10 and 5. They were a family starting over. On the night of April 11th, 1981, the 2 youngest boys had a friend over, a neighbor named Justin. They were all in a small cabin. Sheila, the 14-year-old daughter, had decided to spend the night at a friend's house next door. It was a decision that saved her life. Sometime during that night, while the mountain community slept, something terrible happened inside cabin 28. The next morning, on April 12th, Sheila came home. The front door was unlocked. She walked into the living room and into a nightmare. Her mother, Sue, was on the floor, bound with electrical cord and medical tape. Her brother Johnny and his friend, a 17-year-old named Dana Wingate, were also on the floor bound together. All 3 had been bludgeoned with a hammer and stabbed repeatedly. The scene was chaotic and horrifically violent. The walls were covered in blood. A bent steak knife lay on the floor. Sheila ran from the cabin screaming. The police were called. In the initial confusion, they found the 2 younger boys, Rick and Greg, and their friend Justin, unharmed in a back bed. They had somehow slept through the entire massacre, or maybe they had just hidden too terrified to make a sound. But one person was missing. Tina, the 12-year-old daughter, was gone. The investigation began immediately, but it was flawed from the start. The Plumas County Sheriff's Department was small and unequipped for a crime of this magnitude. The crime scene was not properly secured. People walked in and out. Evidence was compromised. They had 3 dead bodies, a missing child, and 3 young witnesses who couldn't or wouldn't say what happened. The case quickly grew cold. Years passed. Then, in 1984, a bottle hunter found a human skull in the woods about 30 miles from Keddie, and dental records confirmed it was Tina Sharp. A cassette tape and a blue nylon jacket were found nearby. The discovery deepened the mystery. Why was she taken? What happened to her in the 3 years she was missing? The case remained a dark spot in California's history, a ghost story told around campfires. But a persistent theory began to take shape, one that didn't involve random drifters or a drug deal gone wrong. It was a theory that pointed directly at the cabin next door, cabin 27. It was a theory about neighbors. It was a theory about love, rejection, and rage. This brings us to the heart of the question. The people at the center of this theory are Marty Smartt and his wife, Marilyn. Marty was a neighbor. He lived in cabin 27 with Marilyn and their 2 kids. He was also a friend of Sue Sharp. Some say he wanted to be more than a friend. Marty Smartt was a Vietnam veteran. People who knew him said he had a temper. He struggled with PTSD, he and Marilyn had a troubled marriage, and according to many, Marty had developed an interest in Sue Sharp. Sue was a single mother, trying to get by. She was friendly with her neighbors. She would go over to the Smart's cabin for coffee, but Marty's interests might have been more than neighborly. The theory goes that Sue was not interested in Marty romantically. She may have been seeing someone else, or perhaps she just didn't want to get involved with a married man who lived next door. This rejection, the story suggests, festered in Marty. It turned into a dangerous obsession. The night of the murders, Marilyn Smartt later claimed she and Marty had been at a local bar. Marty was in a foul mood. They came home. Marty and his friend, a man named Severin Bubede, left the cabin later that night. Bo was an ex-con from Chicago with a violent past. He was staying with the Smarts at the time. Marilyn said they were going over to Sue's cabin. She claimed Marty was angry. He said he was going to teach that bitch a lesson. Marilyn's account is the cornerstone of the love triangle theory. She became the key, if deeply flawed, witness. Years after the murders, she began to talk. She told a counselor and later police what she knew. She said Marty came home late that night looking disheveled. She said he and Bo burned something in their wood-burning stove. She said Marty threatened her, telling her she would end up just like Sue if she ever told anyone what happened. According to Marilyn, the motive was jealousy. Marty was infatuated with Sue. Sue was rejecting him. And, crucially, Marilyn told her counselor that Sue was having an affair with another man. This man was supposedly a local therapist she was seeing. The idea is that Marty couldn't handle the rejection, especially if Sue was choosing someone else over him. He snapped. The theory continues. Marty and Bo went to Cabin 28 to confront Sue. Johnny, her 15-year-old son, may have tried to defend his mother. This could explain why he was targeted so viciously. Johnny was a strong kid. He would have fought back. Dana Wingate, Johnny's friend who was just there for a sleepover, was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. Became a witness they couldn't leave behind. This narrative seems to connect a lot of dots. It provides a motive, jealousy, which is as old as time. It identifies two main suspects, Marty and Bo, one of whom had a known history of violence. It explains why the attack was so personal and frenzied. This wasn't a clean, professional hit. It was messy, brutal, and full of rage. It felt like something personal. Marty Smart's own actions after the murders also raised suspicion. Shortly after being questioned by police, he abruptly left Keddie. He drove to Reno and sent a letter to Marilyn. The letter was strange. He talked about his love for her and the kids, but he also wrote things that sounded like a confession. He wrote, "I've paid the price of your lovin'. Now that I've bought it with 4 people's lives, you tell me we are through." 4 people's lives. Sue, Johnny, Dana, and Tina. The number fits perfectly. For years, this letter was one of the most compelling pieces of evidence, even if it was circumstantial. It seemed to be a direct admission of guilt, a tormented man confessing to his wife. So, if all this is true, why wasn't the case ever solved? Why weren't Marty and Bo arrested? The answer lies in the deeply flawed initial investigation and a lack of hard physical evidence. In 1981, forensics were not what they are today. DNA testing was not yet a tool for law enforcement. The investigation relied on fingerprints, blood typing, and eyewitness testimony. And the crime scene was a mess. One of the first officers on the scene, a deputy who was a friend of the Smartt family, later admitted he didn't treat Marty as a serious suspect. He interviewed Marty briefly, but didn't push him. It's possible that personal connections clouded professional judgment in the small, tight-knit community. Bo Bubede was also questioned, but he too was let go. He died of natural causes in 1988. Marty Smartt died of cancer in 2000. For decades, it seemed any chance of justice died with them. But the story doesn't end there. The case was officially reopened in 2013 by a new sheriff, Greg Hagwood, who was a teenager in the area when the murders happened. He and his team began to re-examine every piece of evidence. They digitized the old case files. They re-interviewed witnesses, and they found things that the original investigators had missed. One of the most significant discoveries was a hammer. It was found in a local pond in the years after the murders and had been sitting in an evidence locker for decades. The new investigators believed it was consistent with the type of weapon used to bludgeon the victims. And where did this hammer come from? A witness came forward and said that Marty Smartt had admitted to him that he lost his hammer around the time of the murders. It's not a smoking gun, but it's another piece that seems to fit the puzzle. The new investigation also focused heavily on Marilyn Smart's story. They found her old counselor, who confirmed what Marilyn had told him all those years ago. The counselor had tried to tell the sheriff at the time, but he was dismissed. He claimed the sheriff told him, "I don't want to hear it. This suggests a deliberate effort by the original investigators to ignore a promising lead." Why would they do that? Some speculate it was simple incompetence, others wonder if there was something more, a cover-up to protect someone. We may never know for sure. The renewed focus on the love triangle theory brought more details to light. Marilyn had also told her counselor that on the morning after the murders, she found a bloody jacket belonging to Tina Sharp in her basement. She said she turned it over to the sheriff, who then told her he'd lost it. This is a stunning claim. If true, it means the sheriff's department had physical evidence linking the crime to the Smart's home and either lost it or disposed of it. But the love triangle theory is not without its problems. It has holes that are hard to ignore. First, Marilyn Smartt was not always a consistent witness. She changed parts of her story over the years. She was a woman in a troubled, perhaps abusive marriage. Her motivations for speaking out and for what she chose to say are complex. Was she telling the whole truth? Was she protecting herself? Was she trying to deflect blame? It's difficult to build a murder case solely on the testimony of one person, especially when that person has their own complicated history. Second, the scale of the violence is almost too extreme for a simple crime of passion. A jealous rage might explain an attack on Sue, but why the brutal murders of 2 teenage boys? And why the abduction of a 12-year-old girl? The sheer brutality seems to go beyond a spurned lover's revenge. Feels like something darker, something more calculated. This leads to the biggest hole in the theory, Tina Sharp. The love triangle motive doesn't provide a clear explanation for why she was taken from the cabin. Sue, Johnny, and Dana were killed at the scene. Why was Tina treated differently? She was abducted and kept alive for some period of time before being killed and left in the woods miles away. One possibility is that she was a witness. Perhaps she woke up during the attack and saw the killer's faces. They couldn't kill her there because the two younger boys and their friend were in the next room. Making more noise might have woken them up too. So, they took her with them to silence her permanently. This fits in a way, but it feels like a stretch. Another, more disturbing possibility is that the crime wasn't just about jealousy. Maybe there was a sexual motive involved as well, specifically directed at Tina. This complicates the love triangle narrative significantly. It suggests the motive was not a singular emotion, but a twisted combination of rage, jealousy, and predatory desire. Is that Marilyn Smartt, in some of her accounts, mentioned another man being with Marty and Bo that night. A composite sketch released by police at the time, based on a witness who saw two men near the cabin, didn't perfectly match Marty or Bo. So, was there a third person or even a fourth? This is where the theory starts to fray. If more people were involved, the simple narrative of a jealous lover loses its power. It becomes a conspiracy. And if it's a conspiracy, what was the real motive? Was it still about Sue, or was it about something else entirely? Some investigators and amateur sleuths have pointed to drugs. Dana Wingate, the 17-year-old friend, was rumored to be involved in the local drug scene. Some have suggested that he had recently stolen drugs from dealers, and the killers came to the cabin looking for him. In this scenario, Sue and Johnny were just in the way. They were collateral damage in a drug-related hit. This theory explains the extreme violence, which is common in drug-related crimes. It also explains why Dana was there and why he was killed. But it doesn't explain the personal nature of the attack on Sue, who was the primary target according to the way her body was left. And it doesn't explain why Tina was abducted. Drug dealers typically don't kidnap 12-year-old girls. They send a message and they leave. So we are left circling back to Cabin 27. We circle back to Marty and Marilyn and Bo. Despite the inconsistencies and the unanswered questions, the love triangle theory remains the most compelling explanation for what happened in Cabin 28. It feels human in the most terrible way. It's a story of small-town life, of secrets between neighbors, of emotions boiling over until they explode into violence. Let's try to piece it together based on this theory. Marty Smartt is obsessed with his neighbor, Sue Sharp. He sees her as an escape from his own unhappy marriage. But Sue doesn't want him. She rejects him, maybe for another man. This rejection humiliates Marty. His friend Bo Bubede, a man with a dark past and no conscience, is staying with him. Maybe Bo eggs him on. Maybe he sees Marty's rage as an opportunity for chaos. They go over to Cabin 28 that night. Maybe they just intended to scare her, to confront her. But things escalate quickly. Johnny steps in to protect his mom. A fight breaks out. The hammer comes out. The knives come out. The rage is unleashed. Dana Wingate is there, a witness who has to be silenced. In the midst of the carnage, they see Tina. She saw them. They grab her and take her with them, leaving the two younger boys asleep in the back room. What happened to Tina after that is the darkest part of the story. She was held captive. The details of what she endured are unknown, but it's hard to imagine they weren't horrific. Eventually, she was killed and her remains were discarded in the woods far from home. This narrative, as horrifying as it is, makes a certain kind of sense. It accounts for the personal nature of the attack. It accounts for the specific victims. It provides a motive, however twisted. And it aligns with the story that Marilyn Smartt, the person closest to the main suspect, told for years. The renewed investigation in the 2010s seemed to solidify this theory. The sheriff, Greg Hagwood, has stated publicly that he believes he knows who is responsible. He has pointed the finger squarely at Marty Smartt and his accomplices. DNA evidence found on a piece of medical tape at the scene was tested. It was a partial match to a known associate of Marty Smartt, a man who is still alive. This suggests that the circle of killers may have been wider than just Marty and Bo. But without a full confession, and with the main suspects dead, a definitive legal conclusion is almost impossible. The case is still officially unsolved. So, did a love triangle lead to the Keddie Cabin Murders? The answer is probably yes, but that yes needs a lot of explanation. It wasn't a simple, clean triangle. It was a tangled, ugly web of obsession, rejection, anger, and male pride. It was a one-sided love affair that curdled into hate. The term love triangle almost sounds too romantic, too simple for what happened. It implies a relationship between three people. This was more likely a case of unrequited obsession. Marty wanted Sue. Sue did not want Marty. The third point of the triangle might not have been a specific person, but simply Sue's rejection of Marty. Her desire for a life that didn't include him. That was the insult he couldn't stomach. The murders were not just the result of a love triangle, they were the result of that jealousy mixed with other toxic ingredients, Marty's violent temper, and possible PTSD. Bo Bubede's criminal influence. The isolation of Keddie. The failure of law enforcement to see what was right in front of them. It was a perfect storm of circumstances that ended in the destruction of a family. The story of the Keddie murders is a cautionary tale. It shows how secrets can fester in a small town. It shows how the people you trust, the neighbors you share a cup of coffee with, can be capable of unimaginable things. And it shows how the pursuit of a simple human desire like love or companionship can go horribly, tragically wrong. The ghosts of Cabin 28 still linger. The cabin itself was demolished in 2004, as if to erase the physical scar from the landscape. But the memory remains. The questions remain. For the surviving family members, for the community, and for anyone who hears the story, the lack of a final answer is a wound that won't close. We are left with a strong theory, a collection of circumstantial evidence, and the haunting words of a dead man in a letter to his wife, "I've bought it with 4 people's lives." That sentence, more than anything else, points to the motive. It wasn't about money. It wasn't about drugs. It was about possession. It was about a twisted kind of love that, when denied, turned into the purest form of hate. The love triangle, in whatever form it took, wasn't just a part of the story. It was very likely the spark that lit the fuse.